Good morning, Delaware, and thank you for joining the News Journal and DelawareOnline.com. I'm Ed Forbes, Senior Director for Opinion. Joining us this morning are members of the Delaware congressional delegation, Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester, Senator Tom Carper, and Senator Chris Coons. Welcome all.
Thanks, Ed.
And also with us this morning are my colleagues, Delaware Online and News Journal editors Phil Friedman and Brittany Horn. Welcome, friends.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have everyone. Well, it's been a few months since we last gathered, and last spring when we did get together, it seemed like the man from Delaware who occupies the White House was off and running on what would prove to be a fairly productive year. On nearly every front, though, the president, Joe Biden, has faced some complications. Of course, the infrastructure package was passed, a major congressional win for Biden and for Delaware. But there are still apparent machinations on Build Back Better and voting rights and many other things. And so we want to start the conversation this morning checking in with you all on how you think the president is doing and what you've talked with him about how he can change the narrative and get things moving a little bit faster and how he can get a little bit more of his agenda accomplished this year, especially in advance of the midterms. So, Congresswoman, would you kick us off? How do you think the president's doing, and what are you hearing from him, and what are you telling him?
Yes. Well, first of all, Ed, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone who is watching, and I'm just glad to be here with my colleagues from the Senate, Senator Tom Carper and Senator Chris Coons. I would say that we have to put everything into perspective. What an incredible photo that you're showing right now that talks about voting. And the fact that this president, even when he ran, there was a lot of conversation about would he win, could he win? And I always say, don't count Joe Biden out. And just like he says, don't count America out. He's done some historic things, even within 1 year. You mentioned the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is going to make sure that our bridges, our roads, our internet connection is available. But he also led and worked with the Senate and the House on the American Rescue Plan. And I think about that. When we talked last time, I had these three themes of recover, rebuild, and restore. We are now in a recovery, both from our economy as well as our health. He has worked to rebuild, and that's what Build Back Better is about. And we continue to press forward with that. And then we also have to restore everything from how we treat each other to our voting rights. And so I think he's doing an incredible job, but I also think he recognizes, like we do, that people are hurting right now. It's a pandemic. There is a lot of pain. And we want to make sure that we continue to move forward and work. That's how Joe Biden works as a person. It's about getting the job done. It's not just about likes or clicks or polls. And so I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing, and I'm looking forward to the work that's to come.
Congresswoman, thank you. Senator Coons?
Well, I'll focus, if I can, on the significant difference President Biden has made globally and in where we stand in the world. One of the first things he did as president was to rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. And in Glasgow, just a few months ago, all the leaders of the world gathered for a new commitment to combating climate. Delaware is the lowest lying state in the whole country, the lowest mean elevation state. And we've seen some real consequences for our agriculture, for our tourism, and for our families and our communities from freak weather events, from flooding, and from storms. President Biden has taken real leadership, both at the Glasgow COP26 conference and in rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, and in getting into the infrastructure bill that's now law, significant investments that'll deal with resiliency and rebuilding our infrastructure in a way that is sensitive to the challenges of climate. I just got off a call with the German ambassador, with several other senators. President Biden has reunited our NATO alliance, has put us in a strong position to stand up to Putin and Russia's aggression, and has brought together in a new way, in a stronger way, our Indo-Pacific partners and allies to strengthen our position in the Indo-Pacific. So I'm just complimenting what Congresswoman Blunt Rochester said about the ways in which the American Rescue Plan and the bipartisan infrastructure law have provided a strong foundation for economic growth, for recovery, and for getting out of this pandemic. and commenting on the ways in which I believe he's put us on a stronger footing in the world by strengthening our alliances.
Senator, thank you. Senator Carper?
Yeah. Again, thanks to all of you for allowing Chris and Lisa and I to join you this morning. When Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, was about to get on a helicopter and fly out of the Delaware National Guard headquarters to head for D.C. to get ready to be inaugurated, I had a chance, Chris and Lisa and I had a chance to talk with him a little bit. One of the things I said to him was the words of a Methodist minister from Seaford, Delaware, who once said to me when I was about to become governor, he said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I said to Joe Biden, I said, for you, my friend, the main thing is the pandemic. You're becoming president in the middle of the worst pandemic in 100 years, or maybe the worst economy since the Great Depression. And for you, the key is to get the pandemic in the rearview mirror as quickly as we can, fast as we can, many people vaccinated as quickly as we can, and that will set the stage for actually getting the economy moving as well. I think the last numbers I checked indicated about 70% or so of the American people have now been vaccinated at least once, many of them twice with booster shots. We've had to take on not one version of the virus, but the Delta variant and also the Omicron, and have responded well. We're now seeing the Omicron numbers drop actually in a very encouraging way in Delaware and the northeastern part of the U.S. and other parts as well. As the Omicron is wrestled to the ground, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. The economy is I think poised to be even stronger than it was this last year. I mentioned Joe Biden became president in the worst recession since the Great Depression, and if you look at, I think we've seen more job growth in the last year than we've seen in any 1 year period in a long time. We've seen not only that, we've seen the number of people that are filing for unemployment. The number is dropping precipitously. The economy is I think poised to. We can get the supply chain thing solved. The economy is poised to be even stronger going forward. And the last thing I would say is we've got to get the key to getting the virus under control. Allows kids to go back to school, businesses to reopen, and I think that is about to happen. Last thing I would mention, when Donald Trump was president, he was his second month of president, and no, this was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago when he was president. The virus was just setting in on us, and he said at a press conference in almost exactly 2 years ago this week, he said it's going to be like the flu in a couple of months. It'll just fade away. Well, it didn't. But I think we're in a position. I think he was 2 years early in his prediction. The virus, I think, is not going to fade away, and it's going to keep coming back in different variations. We just have to be ready to tackle them, and we are getting better and better at this. Thank God for the pharmaceutical folks around the country, around the world. They're helping us to put this genie back in the bottle. I'm encouraged, and I'm upbeat about where we are and where we're going.
Thanks, Senator. Phil, over to you.
So again, thanks for joining us this morning. I as a observer, which I guess is what I could be called, when the Democrats have controlled the Senate and the House and the White House, why? I mean, I guess we know why. I guess it's a two-part question. Why has it been so hard to get anything done? Why has it been such a struggle, more so than in other times when one party had complete control? And is that going to break? I know the midterms are coming up, but what do you see that? I know we've had a period of extreme polarization, not just in Congress, but in the country. And are there fears that that's happening within the Democratic Party too, I guess? So pick any part of that you like.
Phil, if I can, I'll just push back on the assumption in your question that nothing's gotten done. In the last year, more than $3 trillion in investment. We sent stimulus checks to 80 million American households. We distributed a record number of vaccines, hundreds of millions of shots in arms. A year ago, the overwhelming majority of schools were closed. Today, the overwhelming majority, more than 90% of schools are open. We had 6% economic growth last year. And I think, frankly, in the face of the worst public health crisis in a century and organized, even politicized opposition to basic public health measures, we've seen strong leadership by President Biden and bipartisan work to make sure that those distributed benefits have helped millions of small businesses survive, nonprofits, schools, hospitals. So first, the American Rescue Plan, which was led by President Biden, voted in by just Democrats, last March, distributed $1.9 trillion in support, which helped stave off a deep recession and help lay the groundwork for a strong economic recovery. Second, the bipartisan infrastructure law is the single greatest investment in infrastructure since Eisenhower. It'll create 650,000 high-skilled, high-wage jobs. His predecessor, President Trump, talked about passing an infrastructure bill so many times it became a running joke, and President Biden got it done. So while I understand there's been some focus on the challenges around voting rights, which are significant and real, and all three of us believe that voting rights matter, they're foundational to our democracy, there is some division in the Democratic caucus with 2 members who don't agree with the other 48. But the record of accomplishment of the Biden administration in its first year is impressive, particularly given the partisan division, particularly given just how close our margins are in both the House and the Senate. So I frankly think, looking back at it, it was an impressive record in the first year.
I'd love to comment on that as well. Because I think it's sort of like the big story a lot of times. And being in the House in particular, I mean, first of all, Senator Coons, I think, really laid it out well in terms of the major accomplishments that have already taken place. But in the House, I look at the fact that because I represent Delaware, I want to make sure that I'm representing everybody. So I am in the Progressive Caucus. I am in the New Dems, or Business Friendly Caucus. I'm in the Congressional Black Caucus and the Women's Caucus. And so I get to see how we all work together. And so for us to pass these major pieces of legislation that affect all Delawareans and everyone across the country is an incredible feat. And I have some examples of even us working across the aisle during this very challenging time. I mean, right now, I am working with a bipartisan team. We're leading 2 bills that are focused on supply chain. These are things that are going to help Delaware. And it was as a result of conversations that I had with Delaware businesses, individuals and their families. And so I think, we need to focus, or as the Senator Carper said, keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is that we are getting things done. And while there's more to do, we are moving forward with that. And so I want to also echo what Senator Coons said. It's not easy. I'll be honest with you. It is not easy. It's not pretty every day. But the major work of 6.4 million jobs being created this year, over 70%, maybe 75% of Americans with shots in arms. These are things that are major. And what is ahead of us in terms of voting rights and in terms of doing things like universal pre-K are also transformational. And I just want to make sure people don't lose sight of the fact that we are working together.
Let me add to that a little bit if I can. I never met Winston Churchill, but he said a lot of things that I agree with. One of the things he said democracy is the worst form of government devised by wit of man, except for all the rest. This is a hard way to govern. This is a hard way to govern. We have a situation here where we're at 50-50 Senate. The leader of the Republicans in the Senate is not Bob Dole, it's Mitch McConnell. And they're 2 very different people with 2 very different approaches to governing. This president pretty good at reaching across the aisle, but it's been extremely challenging. To his credit, he's just not given up. There's no quit in this guy. I grew up in a little town in Virginia called Danville, the last capital of the Confederacy. My sister and I saw discrimination and prejudice up close and personal. We saw that people couldn't get to vote because they couldn't pass a literacy test, because they didn't own any property, had never paid a poll tax. And we're now sort of revisiting that with a real serious effort to suppress the voter turnout, make it really hard for a certain segment of our population to vote. And this is not an easy fight, and it's the right fight. It's the key to our democracy is the ability to vote and know that people's ballots are going to be counted. And while we didn't pass the legislation that we wanted to, it was the right fight to make. It was the right fight to make, and we'll continue to do that. The last thing on the Build Back Better, I don't think we messaged too well on what Build Back Better is. I divide it into two pieces. One is to strengthen families, the basic building block of our societies, in any number of ways. And the second piece is to focus on the greatest challenge we face on this planet, and that is climate change, which is scary and getting worse. There's so much in this legislation to help us address climate change, the climate crisis, and in ways that will create jobs and economic opportunity for a lot of people in this country. It's a great piece of legislation. I think in the end, we may end up taking it up in different pieces, several different pieces. I'm reaching out to some of my Democratic colleagues this week to make sure that we can move forward on things like methane emissions, which are a big cause of global warming in our planet. And so there's plenty of work to do. I'm by nature an optimistic person. I'm convinced we're going to get where we need to go, in spite of the fact that democracy is the worst form of government devised by the will of man, except for all the rest. It's a tough way to govern. We're learning that again. And this is when Churchill said all those things. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have Facebook and all this other stuff. We didn't have the kind of divisiveness that's characteristic of politics these days. But we're making progress. And like another great quote by Churchill, I shared this with Joe Biden a couple of days ago. Churchill said, right at the worst part of World War II, when the Germans were just beating the crap out of Britain day and night. And Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. When you're going through hell, keep going. Well, our country's been going through hell for several years now, and we've kept going. And there's a brighter future, and it's within our grasp. And the key is just to keep going.
Thanks, Senator. Question for Senator Coons. You mentioned the president's efforts to strengthen our connection and leadership in NATO. Obviously, the situation in Ukraine is tense. What should our viewers here in Delaware know about that situation, and what do you think lies ahead in the days to come?
Thank you for the question, Ed. First, it's that President Biden has a clear focus on what we need to do to deter Russia. In the Congress, we need to take up and pass next week bipartisan legislation that will authorize President Biden to impose crushing sanctions on Russia. And President Biden, Secretary Blinken, National Security Advisor Sullivan have been doing the hard work of rallying our European partners and allies to that same view. We are on the verge of a final decision by Putin, whether or not he's going to send some of 125,000 troops, Russian troops that are massed all along the border of Ukraine to the northwest, north, and northeast in Belarus and in Russia. And most of the intelligence assessments that have been repeated publicly in the press suggest that he has done everything he needs to be prepared to take advantage of the deep freeze of late January, early February, when Russian tanks can move swiftly in. And both UK and American intelligence suggests that the Russians are intending to try and overthrow duly elected President Zelensky of Ukraine and replace him with a pro-Russian puppet. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, so we are not committed through Article 5 of the NATO treaty to its defense. I do not expect to see American troops fighting Russians in Ukraine, but we are sending weapons and material, $200 million arriving last week and this week, $650 million last year in sophisticated weapons. And President Biden has helped encourage our close allies, the United Kingdom, France, the Czech Republic, Poland, the Baltic states, to also send weapons. This is a tense moment. If the Russians proceed, it'll be the biggest military action since the Second World War in Europe, and it would reshape our relations with Russia. And frankly, it would accomplish the one thing Putin is trying to prevent. It would bring together NATO, reunify NATO in the face of ongoing Russian aggression.
Thank you, Senator. We'll keep our certainly be keeping our eyes on all things in Europe in the days to come. Phil,
can I add to that? Could I add to that?
Sure, absolutely, Senator.
Most people hear the word Georgia, they think of Atlanta in the state of Georgia. There's a country called Georgia as well in Europe, as we recall, and part of the Soviet orbit, and they became increasingly independent a couple of decades ago. About 10 years ago, Russia decided to teach Georgia, the country of Georgia, a lesson. And they didn't invade, but they took the country to its knees. We're using cyber attacks, shutting down their banking system, their infrastructure for water, electricity, and in ways that crippled the country and made them almost unable to operate. We have abilities to go well beyond aircraft, missiles, tanks, soldiers to wreak havoc on Russia if they decide to follow this course and make them regret it. And where there's a fair amount of talk about sanctions, very strong sanctions that will provide enormous pain, economic pain for Russia and for the Russian people. And even without firing a shot, we have the ability to make them regret if they decide to go into the Ukraine. And I hope and pray that they won't. We have ways to make them regret that they ever did that.
Thanks, Senator. Congresswoman, anything?
I just wanted to reiterate that we're fortunate to have Senator Coons, who is foreign affairs expert, also a president who has a deep history in foreign affairs as well as a strong team. And we know that they're doing everything that they can diplomatically, but that they are also not shy of using everything to our ability to make sure that our national security is intact and that our allies and our alliances are maintained. I think one of the other areas that we haven't mentioned, but I do think is also important to highlight in terms of foreign affairs, is China. And there are times when we must be connected to them. One of the senators mentioned climate change. That's an area where we have to be connected. Healthcare in a pandemic. But we also know there are a lot of other challenges that we've seen, particularly through this pandemic, such as our supply chain issues. The fact that when the pandemic hit, we had vials and tubes and things that we did not have made here in our country or have access to. During the summer, meeting with local businesses in Delaware, heard from them that supply chain issues were really hampering their ability to survive. And even just going to a basic donut place. I remember seeing in the window one day, they had a sign that said, due to supply chain issues, we don't have bagels and donuts. And so we this week, for those who are viewing, were able to introduce in the House the American Competes Act, which is a companion to the bipartisan bill that was passed in the Senate called USICA. And this, again, really, we want to focus on our ability to compete globally with places like China and make sure that our economy continues to be strong and that our health as well is strong. So just wanted to share with folks, we're looking globally, strategically at all of our allies and adversaries as well.
Senator Coons made a very important point. Donald Trump was all about tearing our alliances down and apart, withdraw from the Paris Accords, climate change, to Deep Six, the Iran nuclear agreement, any other variety of ways. Joe Biden's all about strengthening alliances. Lisa likes to tell the story about sticks. Tell them that story that you tell. It's a great story.
It's actually an African proverb. Sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. When you take one of our countries, you might be able to break it. But when you put us all together, and it's the same as people, we're unbreakable. And I want to share, I had a chance during the last administration to go to NATO, to visit members of the European Union. And it was interesting. Many of them were questioning, where is America? Are we still partners? Then I also, in the beginning of my tenure, got a chance to go with Senator Coons to Africa and to hear from African nations asking, are we still partners? Are we still at the table? And so to have a president whose focus is recognizing our connectivity to the world and also our strength, at the same time investing in our infrastructure and our workforce and making sure that we're competitive globally, it puts us in another place. And I hope that people, again, when you look at this first year, 1 year out of 8, you heard me say out of 8, first year, and already has achieved so much. We still have a ways to go. We know that. But I hope that we will also take in the competence, the compassion, the credibility that this president, this administration brings to the table.
Ronald Reagan was elected president in 1980. 2 years later, the Democrats swept to control in the U.S. House of Representatives. I was a freshman congressman. We were 80-some representatives elected that year, new ones in our freshman class, overwhelmingly Democrat. And Reagan administration was reeling. We were in a bad recession, and things just looked awful. And he ended up getting reelected and carried, I think, all but one state in his reelection campaign. So things have a way of turning around. And at the end of the day, part of our challenge is to keep doing what we're doing with respect to the economy and getting this pandemic in the rearview mirror, and not it's not going to be easy, but just keep going through hell, and we're going to do that. And
thank you all.
Positive leader who understands that's people will respond to that kind of positive leadership.
Thank you, Senator. Phil, I know you had a question. We have some potential for news over the next weeks and months related to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's how you know you're talking to newspaper people. We're going to ask about what just happened yesterday. I mean, a lot of us know what's happened. A lot of people are aware of what's happened with the recent Supreme Court nominees. I just want to hear, I know this is more of a Senate question, but I'm sure it's not talked about in the House either. But how do you see the road ahead with Justice Breyer's the nomination for his replacement?
Senator Coons is a senior member of the Judiciary Committee. Why don't we let him lead off on this one?
Thanks, Senator, and thanks for the chance to speak to this. As a member of the Judiciary Committee, I've endured the confirmation hearings of Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Barrett, which were challenging and at times divisive hearings. We've got a number of very promising potential nominees. President Biden committed during the campaign and has recently reaffirmed his commitment to nominate the first ever Black woman justice to the United States Supreme Court. There is currently on the D.C. Circuit Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who graduated from Harvard College, magna cum laude, as a Harvard Law School graduate, practiced law and served on the D.C. District Court. Someone born and raised in Miami, Florida, who I think has a fairly compelling service record and an excellent and outstanding legal education and experience as a judge. She's far from the only potential nominee, but she's the most widely discussed because she was confirmed with 53 votes last year to the D.C. Circuit, widely considered the second most important federal court other than the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm hopeful that President Biden, who's known this was a possibility and has an excellent White House chief counsel and nominations team, that he will meet with and consider the potential nominees who are before him on a short list, make that nomination within the next few weeks, and that we in the Judiciary Committee will take a number of weeks to review that judge's record and background and experience, and then have a confirmation hearing. So we could very well see a newly confirmed justice ready to take the seat once Supreme Court Justice Breyer steps down. I'll just remind you that Justice Breyer, who's been on the Supreme Court for nearly 3 decades, was nominated under President Clinton, and Senator Biden took a significant role in his confirmation hearing. He was a centrist who helped build consensus decisions and majorities. He'll long be remembered for his contribution to landmark decisions, protecting free speech, protecting reproductive rights, and expanding the protections of the First Amendment to Americans. So I think Justice Breyer will leave the court with a proud and long record of service of decades in the federal judiciary. And my hope is that we'll have a less contentious, more deliberate confirmation process than was the case just in the last year of the Trump administration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Brittany?
I was elected governor of Delaware in 1992. I never thought much when I was a candidate for governor about the responsibilities of a governor in a state like Delaware with respect to our judiciary. As it turns out, our judiciary is one of the foremost, most highly regarded judiciaries in the United States. I pledged once I became governor that I'd put together a cabinet that looked like Delaware, diverse like Delaware in terms of ethnic backgrounds, male, female. And we ended up with a terrific team. Lisa was a part of that. She was one of our cabinet secretaries and a huge part of our team. But I wanted to have a judiciary that looked like Delaware. And we put together a judicial nominating commission headed by Jim Gilliam, a highly regarded African-American business person and leader in this state, to help us identify judicial candidates from all kinds of diverse backgrounds, very highly qualified, but still diverse. It was not easy to find people of Asian background, people of African-American background, Latino background, to serve in some of the highest courts in our country. We went to work in Delaware to try to strengthen the bench so that when we had vacancies, that we'd actually have the ability to do what I wanted to do, install a judiciary that looked like Delaware and its diversity. That a lot has changed now, and Senator Coons and I get to be involved in. We have 4 district court positions in Delaware. And we have a vacancy coming up in one of those, and the candidate, the diversity of the field of people highly qualified from all kinds of backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, ethnicity, male, female. It's amazing what has changed in 30 years. There will be a great talent pool for this president to reach into and to nominate. Last thing I would say, we're only as good as the people around us. To Joe Biden's credit, he's put together a terrific team, and Chris and I and others have been very much involved in getting people confirmed for the last year. I'm very proud and just amazed how strong that team is, and I think he will be given the chance to be able to do the same thing with respect to a judiciary that is highly regarded, well prepared, but also looks like America.
Congresswoman?
You know, I have to say something.
Yeah.
Let me first of all start off by saying how grateful we are to Justice Breyer for his service, the 30 years of service. I was actually in the audience when President Biden made the statement about appointing a Black woman to the Supreme Court, the first Black woman to the Supreme Court. It was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Georgia debate, and he set it up on the stage. And this is an incredible moment for the country. You know, first of all, the candidates that I have heard, the names that I have heard, are all outstanding and more than qualified to do the job. And so that's number one. We have some incredible potential candidates out there, which is exciting. But there's also, this week, I actually did a roundtable with Black women elected officials here in Delaware. And I spoke from the perspective of moving, and I heard it from producer, director, writer Ava DuVernay, from moving from representation to normalization. You know, for me to be the first woman, the first person of color to represent Delaware has been an honor. But the goal is that it becomes normalized, that there aren't any more firsts. And so this first on the Supreme Court, I hope will be, again, an opportunity for young people, older people, all of us to see ourselves represented on the Supreme Court, but also that it becomes part of the normalization that we are all able to serve, particularly at a time such as this. So I'm just excited. I'm hopeful that the Senate will be able to act It would be lovely if they could act as quickly as was done for Coney Barrett, but I'm sure Senator Coons, I think I heard a giggle, but I am hopeful that this will happen quickly and that we will be able to make more history in our country, and that she will be able to represent so many young women, young people, and older people. I turn 60 next month, so like that's all in my head.
No, that's not true.
Oh yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
Brittany, over to you. I know you have a question or two.
I do. I was going to say, speaking of history, I think a lot of people are poised and paying attention to the conversation about student loan forgiveness. I realize there's
about what? About what, Brittany?
Student loan forgiveness.
Oh, okay.
I know, hot topic, Senator Carper. I know there has been some headlines even as recent as yesterday that this is being weighed, but what we do know, obviously, at this point is that President Biden has indicated he doesn't plan to take action or have the authority to cancel widespread student debt without a piece of legislation in front of him, which we have yet to see. So what do you say to those patiently waiting for, and for some counting on, some loan forgiveness that I think lots of college grads are crossing their fingers to see?
Let me take that one initially. I grew up. I was born in West Virginia, coal mining town. Nobody in my family have ever gone to college. I remember once when my sister and I were in, I think like middle school, maybe 6th, 7th, 8th grade, we're having a supper in Danville. And my dad said to my sister and me, he said, your mother and I want you to go to college. He said, in West Virginia, Beckley, West Virginia, coal mining town. Almost nobody went to college. We didn't go to college, never thought of going to college. But your mother and I want you to go to college. And my sister said, we want to do that. That's what we want to do, Dad. And my father went on to say, and we want you to figure out how to pay for that. I said, really? He said, really? And I spent the next several years trying to figure out how to pay for school. And I applied to, tried to apply to the Air Force Academy to get a chance to get a commission in education. Applied to, I didn't know how to apply. Ended up a senior in high school, sitting in homeroom one day, and the announcement in the morning announcements in our homeroom, they said, anybody interested in winning Navy scholarship, go see your guidance counselor. And I did in that day, and learn about Navy ROTC, and it's a scholarship Navy pays for college tuition, books, fees, and so forth. Monthly stipend. Every summer you're on active duty, being trained to be a naval officer, and that's what I did. And I graduated in 1968, the height of the Vietnam War. Ended up 3 tours over there during the Vietnam War. Came back and moved from California to Delaware on the GI Bill. Got to go to college to get an MBA from the University of Delaware. I've served with any number of people who have, through their military service, volunteering to service, people who have become doctors in the military, dentists in the military, nurses in the military, who get to go to school with assistance from our taxpayers. And they repay the assistance they've given through their service, through our service. And before we turn around and do some kind of wholesale forgiveness of student debt all at once, I think we need to go into this very, very, very carefully. One of the things we do is in the federal government, we provide the folks that work in our staffs, for example, in the executive branch, the legislative branch, they can do not loan forgiveness, but they can get assistance in paying down their loans or debts by their service to this country. So that is something I want us to keep in mind as we consider this issue.
Briefly, if I might just add to that, President Biden has so far forgiven more than $15 billion in student loan debt. A piece of that loan forgiveness for total and permanent disability is something I worked on over the last couple of years on a bipartisan way. I had a staffer in my office whose older brother graduated from college, had $75,000 in student loan debt, and tragically the next year died of a brain tumor. His parents were thrilled when this young staffer of mine identified the forgiveness program for permanent and total disability or death of someone who had student loans, but were shocked when a few months later they got a $25,000 bill from the IRS. They considered it a taxable event that their deceased son's $75,000 in student loans had been forgiven. I managed to get a bill signed into law that automatically goes through the process of forgiving any tax liability if someone who has student loans is declared permanently and totally disabled or is deceased. Fixing that took a fair amount of work. There is also a significant program for public service. One of the things I've championed in the Senate, later today I'm meeting with the chairman of the AmeriCorps Commission for Delaware, is the opportunity to earn $5,000 towards paying down student debt through serving as an AmeriCorps member. There are hundreds of AmeriCorps members currently serving in Delaware. There have been thousands over the decades that program has been in place. I do think we should proceed with legislation that would broaden the authority of the president to forgive student loan debt. $15 billion is a lot to forgive, but it's a very small percentage of the total student loan debt burden being carried by so many young Americans. So I think we should be exploring with the administration a path forward that gives the president the authority to forgive a much more substantial amount of loan debt, either through national service or because of economic hardship or because of physical or medical impairments of the types that already exist, but that are not as widespread or as easy to take advantage of as I think they should be.
And Brittany, I will just add that I think they've already put a lot of context there for you. I would just add, to me, I think about this past election and how many young people voted. And when I talk to young Delawareans, many of them say that the issues that are paramount to them are climate, student loans, and criminal justice reform. We still have work to do. You know, we still have work to do as it pertains to passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and making sure that we take care of those issues as it pertains to criminal justice reform. There's a lot we've done. I even have a bill called Clean Slate that is bipartisan, bicameral. It's happening across the country. It happened here in Delaware, and we're trying to do it on the federal level. Criminal justice reform. On student loans, I think there's the two things. I'm a mom who had kids that went through college and had student loan debt, and this is one of the big areas for me too, because I hear from my own kids as well as other young people and parents. There's the affordability of college, and then there's how do I deal with the debt that I have. The senators talked about some of the issues and the things that have taken place already to deal with the debt. Build Back Better is another area where affordability is included. And so as we look toward the future, again, of the work that we have to do, it's both student loan debt and it's also about affordability of college as well. And again, for all of those who worked so hard to come out and vote, we want to make sure that we continue to fight for the issues that they sent us to Washington to fight for.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Phil, I know you wanted to get a question in on supply chain, and we're getting close to time, so I want to be respectful of schedules, but go for it, Phil.
Well, it's again a simple question. What would you tell consumers when their store shelves and car lots and things will be maybe back to normal, and some of those areas, not all of them, obviously, prices might drop down to where they were, or close to where they were. Like what's ahead?
Lisa, you want to take a shot at that? I know you've been working on it.
Yeah, I'll just say, first of all, that when we talk about supply chain issues, we're talking about multiple different areas. I mean, there's one thing when you're talking about the prices of meat and how much, whether or not there are big companies that are taking advantage of the situation, compared to the fact that during this pandemic, we switched from buying a lot of services and going to restaurants at one point to buying a lot of goods, and it caused this ripple effect. Part of what the president has done is created this team headed up by Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, and focused on like making sure that we get rid of those roadblocks, such as at our ports. And so they've actually been focused on that. There's also a focus on things like chips for our cars, because we know even car prices have gone up in this current environment because we're dependent on other places, which is why, again, we've introduced the America Competes Act. Two of the bills that I'm co-leading are included in that bill that would also really focus on beefing up our supply chain, making sure that we have a dedicated office that's focused on that we have resources to support Delaware and American businesses. And so check out, it's a 2,900-page bill. So there's a lot there, but we have a strong focus. And really, it's because we heard it from Delawareans. I heard it from Delawareans, and that's how we got involved in it. I know our time is limited, so please feel free to reach out to our offices as well as a follow-up to get more information on what the plan is and the next steps. In terms of, when you can see the changes, because of those actions that the president took back before the holidays, I think we saw some of that at our local stores, but we still, again, like I said, the race isn't over. We're continuing to work. And I, unlike Senator Carper, I don't want to say we're going through hell. I'm just going to say we're going through. And that's what we're doing. We're going through, and we're going to get to the other side.
Yeah, let me just say in closing, there's a correlation between the infrastructure and the kind of investments we're making in infrastructure. If you're offloading, we'll say, ships on the West Coast and trying to get stuff to the East Coast, it takes about 2 days to get those goods to Chicago. It takes about 4 or 5 days to get through Chicago onto to the East Coast. There's so much work and investments we make possible through our infrastructure bill, and ports like the Port of Wilmington, ports all over the country, investments in our rail, investments in our roads, highways, bridges to enable goods and services to move much more quickly. And that's we need truck drivers. We need to train truck drivers and folks like that. And that's all provided for as well. So there's a correlation there, and we can. So it's a twofer. It's a twofer.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Coons, any comment on?
Just a closing thought, if I might, about part of our president's character and his background and his experiences. This coming Thursday, we'll have, again, the National Prayer Breakfast, which has been a tradition going back 70 years. This will be the 70th year. And the keynote speaker, in addition to President Biden, will be Bryan Stevenson, a Delaware native, born and raised in Milton, Delaware, who has led the Equal Justice Initiative. Some of you may have read his book or seen his movie, Just Mercy. And he is someone who I think speaks to the best in us, an ability to come together in a bipartisan way to enact criminal justice reform. Congresswoman Blunt Rochester has been a great leader on this. I've been engaged actively on the Judiciary Committee in recent years. There have been some real steps forward. But my hope is that next Thursday, the members of Congress who will be gathered to hear from our president will hear about his compassion, his ability to get back up when life has knocked him down, and to keep moving forward. I think as president during this ongoing national challenging public health crisis, he's demonstrated the ways in which his leadership reflects compassion and concern for millions of Americans. And Bryan Stevenson will also give us a message that will be a challenge for us to continue to find a path forward to deliver on justice in this country, to make sure that we are able to balance public safety with equity and inclusion and justice in our society in a way that reflects the best in America going forward.
Thank you, Senator. I
think for that I would say that God's people say amen. Amen.
Thank you, Senator. Congresswoman Lisa.
Chris was a great leader, and this is as well. And we thank him for that in the Senate and for the country. We believe in the golden rule to treat other people the way we want to be treated. So does Joe Biden.
Thank you all. Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, Senator Tom Carper, Senator Chris Coons, for Delaware Online and the News Journal, Brittany Horn and Phil Friedman. Thank you all for being with us this morning. Just a quick programming note for our viewers. If you want to take part in the community conversation, just visit DelawareOnline/opinion and submit a letter to the editor or an op-ed. We are always welcoming viewpoints from across our community. For the USA Today Network, I'm Ed Forbes, and we thank you for being with us this morning. Take care, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, folks.